Greetings, brothers and sisters. Welcome to the weekly Mormon News Roundup. I'm your humble host, Steve Ace, and that's talent on loan from Kolob. Every week, we ruminate on the great and spacious beehive. So thanks so much for joining us to discuss the contemporary events in Mormonism. We've got a big episode coming right at you. It's episode number 107, and it's February 18th, 2024. A senior LDS church leader's son has broken his silence about his father's arrest. This is unbelievable. More Jubilee debate fallout. We're going to give you the reaction to a Mormon ex-Mormon debate, which continues to percolate in the LDS sphere. Ensign Peak Advisors, which is the church's investment fund, has hit an all-time high. You're not going to believe how much money that the church has. And finally, there's a bizarre LDS SuperBowl connection, which is Mormon related, and we're going to tell you all about that. If you want to get in touch with me, I'm at www.mormonnewsroundup.org, or you can send me an email to kolob@mormonnewsroundup.org. I'd like to welcome onto the program my fabulous co-hosts, America and Julia. Julia, how's it going?
Good. Thank you so much.
And America, how's it going?
Great. Thanks for having us.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you on. Now, Julia, who are you and what are you all about?
So I'm Julia. So I've had my TikTok since mid-2021. I grew up in the church. I got my degree at BYU, Idaho. I served my mission in Salt Lake and got married in the temple, came out as lesbian, got divorced, and now I'm with America. So yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah, everybody knows about Julia Sanders and your Analyzing Mormonism channel, which has been around for quite some time, but not everybody knows America. America, what's your 60-second Mormon story?
Okay, so I was raised in the church. I went to BYU, Idaho. I was roommates with Julia there. All above board, don't worry. And then I was married in the temple for 7 years. We never had kids. And I realized that I was more of a feminist than I was a member of the church. And so I was in the church physically, but not mentally for about 4 years. And so I sort of deconstructed while going to church. Then Julia and I started talking. We got together, and now I am the power behind the throne.
Oh, that's wonderful. I've been a big fan of Julia Sanders and the Analyzing Mormonism channel. I literally use all of your content like every single week for the Mormon News Roundup because you have this definitive single best soundbite level content for LDS content. Way better than the church's podcast, better than anything I can produce. Because, a short, it's difficult. In a short, it's only 60 seconds. You really can't cover a good article in a short level, which is why most of your content is 2 to 3 minutes long, which is like the perfect summary for our modern day scattered ADHD brains, and that's why your channel has become so popular. So I'm a huge fan. I've used so much of your content for the Mormon News Roundup. If you ever go to the copyright section on YouTube and see who is using your content, and you click the button that says, I don't want this person to use your content, like my channel's going to go out of business. So I'm a big fan. Glad to have you on. Really a pleasure to have you on.
That's so sweet of you. That makes me feel really good.
Great. Let's hop into the news this week. We have a big week here. We have a follow-up from previous times, which is a Mormon church leader, a senior one, has been arrested in the state of Pennsylvania. His name is Stake President Hintze, and a stake president is roughly equivalent to, say, a Catholic archbishop. He's in charge of, say, 2,000 to 3,000 congregants, and it came to his attention that there was a credible accusation of child sex abuse, which came to his attention from a Mormon bishop. But the problem here is that he did not report that to law enforcement. Sean Gooden, who was the one who perpetrated the abuse, he was jailed after pleading guilty to several horrific charges due to his abuse of children in Pennsylvania and in Virginia. But the stake president has since been charged here. This is Stake President Hintze here, and there's Sean Gooden. And this is causing quite a reverberation across the Mormon sphere. And the most amazing thing about this article is that his son has broken his silence. What did you see in the reading of what his son said about President Hintze this time, guys?
So one thing that I thought was interesting is that his son is attending BYU right now. He's just 26. And when you speak out negatively against the church, which he kind of does in this, you put yourself in some sort of danger with the church. And so a lot of people were commenting on that. But yeah, his son spoke out and he said that he had no idea that his father had been excommunicated. I think he found out this year or last year. His dad had been excommunicated in 2020. So it had been some time, and neither him nor the ward nor any of his family knew that he had been excommunicated. So that's a problem to me, especially because they treated Sean Gooden like a member in good standing, which puts him in position with young children or teens. And that's really, really dangerous. So because there's debate whether the stake president was actually a mandated reporter because no child was in danger. But at the same time, children are in danger.
Let's play one of your world famous videos here, which we frequently see from the Analyzing Mormonism channel. And that's where you're going to explain this entire thing to us in a short period of time, only 1 minute and 52 seconds. By the way, I've noticed on this that you don't have a tripod. America, are you the one who's holding the camera for these? Or how does that work?
She doesn't like to record in front of me whenever possible. She's just holding the camera herself most of the time.
Like if you see it's shaky, it's because my hands are shaky.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay, so let's play the sum up here. And America, get your reaction to what the Sun has said about Stake President Hintze and his charges that his father is facing.
So last week, Daily Mail released some more information concerning Bishop Sean Corey Gooden and Stake President Rhett Hintze. The information came from Sean Corey Gooden's 26-year-old son named Matthew. Matthew is still a member of the church and he is currently attending BYU. Matthew said that his father Sean and Rhett Hintze were very good friends and that they would often hang out together outside of church functions. Matthew believes that President Hintze didn't report his father to the police because they were good friends. Matthew said that after a victim and his father told Rhett Hintze of the abuse, the church offered to spare his father the humiliation of excommunication if he reported himself to the police. Of course, Gooden refused to turn himself into the police and he was excommunicated. Except no one, not even Gooden's own family, knew that he had been excommunicated. Everyone in his family and in the ward continued to believe that he was a member in good standing. Matthew said that while his father had been excommunicated, the church allowed him to continue attending church functions and meetings with children present. The article says specifically that Matthew believes that it is indicative of its callous attitude towards abuse. Matthew told the Daily Mail, "The church is interested in protecting its leaders, its reputation, and the victims of their families can just go to hell." The abuse of these two children happened before Matthew was even born, and it didn't stop until he was 3 years old. So this Mormon bishop was abusing two children for at least 3 years. Rhett Hintze is also facing years behind bars. The article says that the fact that one of the victims told Hintze of the abuse might explain why he's being charged. Someone reached out to me a couple of days ago from President Hintze's stake, and they said that he came and spoke to the ward just this last Sunday. He didn't mention the charges against Gooden or himself. He just acted as if nothing was happening. It sounds like the church is just trying to make this all go away. Also, if there's a in the ward, the members deserve to know. And I think excommunication should automatically happen when someone is abusing children. It is so disturbing that the church lets people maintain their membership who have committed these types of crimes.
What is the point of being excommunicated if you just keep acting like a member? Like, what is the point? Ward buildings are full of kids. And if you're just continuing to go to church as if nothing has changed, what is the point of being excommunicated? The pedophile is just sitting there amongst all the kids. Like, even if he doesn't have a calling with the children, you're surrounded by children at these ward buildings. That's disgusting that they just pretended like nothing happened. Like, no warning. Like, at least the parents should know, hey, don't let your kids spend time at this man's house. At the very minimum.
The fact that the stake president, not only did he let him continue to have access to children, then he did not report it to police. And I know that there is a little bit of some confusion, or maybe it's a slight gray area as far as the reporting is concerned. As far as the stake president being a mandated reporter, there might be some legal gray area here, which is why the church has said that they're going to vigorously defend the stake president. But it appears that the stake president took no opportunity to talk to law enforcement about whether he was a mandated reporter. Instead, it appears that he just called the helpline. The helpline said, don't report it. And that's as far as he took it. So this is a really, really troubling issue. And we had Jana Reese on the Mormon News Roundup podcast 2 weeks ago, and she said that this would probably be like a landmark case as far as church reporting is concerned, because we're starting to see in a lot of states that don't have the so-called clergy penitent privilege that these types of charges could become more common. And the Mormonish podcast also talked about how you could be called to a position in the church and then you have legal liabilities with regards to the church's harmful practice of not reporting child sex abuse. I mean, it's one thing to serve in a church calling and say, you know what, I'm going to help my fellow man and I'm going to help people out. It's another thing to potentially go to jail or even prison for your calling. What's your last thoughts on President Hintze's son this week?
Well, I just wanted to say something too. So the reason this all came out and the reason Sean Gooden was arrested was because one of the victims went to counseling and told the therapist, and the therapist saw himself as a mandated reporter, even though this person was an adult. So they reported it to the police and Sean Gooden was arrested. So like, where's the gray area? This person still has access to children. I don't know. The President Hintze 100% should have reported him to the police.
Yeah, I definitely agree. When in doubt, you take it up with law enforcement and ask law enforcement, am I a mandated reporter? Give them the circumstances and they will inform you. And it appears that law enforcement in this case would have told President Hintze that, yes, you're a mandated reporter. That's why charges have been referred. Because he didn't do the basic due diligence of following the law in Pennsylvania, he's received one charge of not reporting child sex abuse. This is going to be vigorously defended by the church, and we're going to be watching it here on the Mormon News Roundup. And I'm sure Analyzing Mormonism will do so as well. Another article that came to my attention this weekend, it was because the fact that, Julia, you're getting a master's degree in history, right?
Yes, yeah.
Well, congratulations. And that's the great thing about the Analyzing Mormonism channel, is that not only do you get contemporary LDS news issues in really well put out, really well researched sound bites, you also get LDS church history from a bona fide historian, which really makes Analyzing Mormonism the best LDS content on the web, hands down. Obviously, you can tell I'm a giant fanboy. But anyway, I saw this article this week and it really got my attention because we were going to have you on the Mormon News Roundup, and we got this article that came out of Latter-day Saint Mag, which is one of my favorite magazines because their articles are usually so ridiculous. But it was from Davis Bitton that says, I don't have a testimony of the history of the church. And let's play your soundbite that goes along with that, Julia, and why you took issue with the fact that, you know, not having a testimony of the history of the church, that's kind of an incongruous statement.
A few days ago, an article released called I Don't Have a Testimony of the History of the Church. It was written by a man named Davis Bitton, who was an official assistant church historian who worked under Leonard Arrington. While he passed away in 2007, the Meridian magazine re-released this abbreviated version 5 days ago. Basically, in my opinion, it's a very disingenuous article that paints those who stop believing due to problematic church history as being whiny, judgmental, unrealistic, enemies, anti-Mormons, and many other things. It seems to totally invalidate those who have left for this very reason. The entire article is upsetting, but there was one thing that I wanted to address specifically, and that's concerning expectations. David Bitton said, what's potentially damaging or challenging to faith depends entirely, I think, on one's expectations, and not necessarily history. Any kind of experience can be shattering to faith if the expectation is such that one is not prepared for the experience. The problem is with the expectation, not with the history. One of the jobs of the historians is to try to see to it that expectations are realistic. The Lord does not expect us to believe lies. To reduce the study of problematic church history as expectations isn't accurate. If I am taught that the Book of Mormon is true, I expect the evidence to support that. If I am taught that Joseph Smith saw God in Christ in 1820, I expect the history to support that. If I am taught that the witnesses saw literal gold plates, or that God literally talks to prophets and that prophets will never lead us astray, I expect the evidence in history to support those things. The church has long painted itself as an all or nothing type of church.
Each of us has to face the matter. Either the church is true or it is a fraud. There is no middle ground. It is the church and kingdom of God or it is nothing.
When trying to figure out why people choose to stay in the church when they know the history, the question we should be asking is not one concerning expectations. It's concerning a human's ability to stay in an organization when confronted with troublesome and even contradictory evidence. It happens all the time. Humans are complex, and so are organizations like the Mormon Church. I think when confronted with troubling church history, members are forced to do one of three things. 1, ignore or disregard the evidence. 2, change your beliefs. Or 3, let go of your beliefs altogether. I love the quote by Jeremy Reynolds that says, Mormonism redefines faith as embracing what you hope to be true in spite of science, fact, and history. This would be something like, oh, there's no historical evidence that Joseph Smith saw God in Christ in 1820? Well, I'm going to ignore all of that and believe anyway. Joseph Smith said he saw God in Christ in at least one of his first vision accounts, so I'm going to believe that. Changing beliefs can look something like this. Oh, Joseph Smith secretly had relations with other men's wives? This is contrary to the law of chastity and fidelity within marriage. So I will change my belief that prophets don't actually speak to God, and they can absolutely lead people astray. But he was still called of God to lead the church. I don't want to speak for him, but I think that Patrick Mason, the Mormon historian, is in this camp.
Joseph Smith's polygamy, I don't want to put lipstick on a pig, and I don't like it.
And of course, the last one is to let go of belief altogether, which is where many of us have found ourselves. If you have family members or friends who have left the church because of problematic church history, please don't think of them as whiny, judgmental, or unrealistic. And please do not think of them as your enemy. Despite what you are told, there are many good reasons to leave the church. What I suggest you do is listen. I'm not asking that you get into debates with ex-Mormons concerning what happened in church history, but if you listen, I am almost certain that you will learn that the reason that they left is valid.
So, America, what do you take away from an article that says that I don't have a testimony of the history of the church, meaning that a testimony of historical events in church history is not important, and you can just believe on faith, even if there's absolutely no evidence to back up your beliefs?
Well, I think that's really silly because the entire foundation of the church is on Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, and the pioneers. That's what we're taught from the time we're very small, is the pioneers, da 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 da. But Joseph Smith, we literally sing songs about him. Other churches have accused us of, I'm saying us, but I mean the LDS Church, have accused the LDS Church of worshiping Joseph Smith. And I would say, as a person who's standing outside of it and looking back in, I would say that's accurate. So if we don't have a testimony of the history of the church, you don't have a testimony of the founder of the church and the reason that the church is the way it is. Like, that's sort of important. And I totally understand why he doesn't have a testimony of the history of the church, because it's garbage and it's scary and it's full of really terrible people doing really terrible things. If we're going to spend the rest of our lives giving all of our time and energy to a church, maybe it should be based in fact. Maybe it should be based in, I don't know, God, like a God that spoke to a real prophet. If he's not a real prophet, because he's proven himself not to be by being a terrible person. Like, he's just a terrible person. Like, how many people did he coerce to be his wives for no clear reason? It needs to be based in fact.
So I don't get a lot of historians necessarily on the Mormon News Roundup, although I did have Patrick Mason on the Mormon News Roundup a couple of months ago. But Julia, you studied a lot of church history, much more than the average person, much more than I have for sure. Is it important to make sure that church history facts are tethered to reality? For instance, the restoration of the priesthood, or the actual historicity of the Book of Mormon, or certain church events that happen which are seminal, like Moroni appearing to Joseph Smith and giving him a set of gold plates. Is it necessary for those facts to be objectively in reality, or can you just take everything on faith and completely ignore any contradictions in church history?
I think it absolutely should be in reality. So, like, I don't want people to see my content and feel like I'm trying to get people to leave the church. That's not what I'm doing. What I'd like people to do is to say, yeah, Joseph Smith's polygamy looks like lipstick on a pig. Like, for them to acknowledge that there are things like, oh yeah, the witnesses said that they only saw the plates with their spiritual eyes. Like, acknowledge the hard things about the church and make your own choice. Whether stay, acknowledge that those things are there, that they have those problems, but stay anyway because that's where you find your community. Or just see us as valid for having left because we have the integrity, or we have, not that people who stay don't have integrity. I don't know. I just want them to see us leaving as valid, because that whole article was just so upsetting. And I just pulled out one section because, like, it'd be really hard to respond to everything, but
she told me that if you want to spend an afternoon being angry, read that article.
When it comes to the Mormon News Roundup, the guests that come on, I try to find articles that I think will resonate with the guests who come on. And I figured that would probably get a strong reaction out of you in particular, because I know that church history is something that's very important to you and to the rest of us as well. And so we really appreciate what you do with your deep dives and also your shallow dives. That's the great thing about analyzing Mormonism, is your shallow dives are actually very deep. You get a very good understanding of the issues in church history in a short period of time. I love the Sunstone Mormon History podcast. I like, the Year of Polygamy. I love those historical podcasts, but I don't necessarily have the 3 or the 4 hours time. So that's why I really appreciate
yeah,
what
I
it is
often
that
think
you
of
do.
myself, I was like, if Dan Vogel or if Lindsay Hansen Park or Brian Buchanan had their TikToks, I wouldn't have a job.
You're filling a niche there that's super important. So yes, this article, I don't have a testimony of the history of the church. That's kind of a problem, because you need to have your testimony rooted in evidence. And if there's no evidence to support your assertions or your beliefs, then they are not rational. And in fact, if there's contrary evidence, if there's evidence to support the negative, meaning that these events actually did not happen, that's a super big problem. And that's what this article fails to grapple with. Kind of reminds me of when President Oaks, I believe it was, who said that, what do you do if your partner is having difficulties with church history? He said, may I suggest that research is not the answer? I believe that was in a question and answer session. I could not disagree more strongly. And I definitely take issue with this particular article. And I love your reaction video to it. Speaking of church history, and there's another church history article that came out this week, and it was released on ldsliving.com, which is another one of my favorite news sources here. And as one of LA's top vocal directors says, he has been changed by the faith of early Black saints. So this is Molly Jr. Bonner. I'm hoping that I am saying that correctly. He works in the film and in the music industry, and he's going to be putting together a documentary on Elijah Abel. Now, Julia, who is Elijah Abel, and why? What is his significance in church history?
So Elijah Abel was one of the early Black members of the church, and he was one of the first to receive the priesthood from Joseph Smith. So there's problems later that we can talk about with his priesthood. But yeah, so everyone points to him. They're like, Joseph Smith was not racist because look at Elijah Abel. He was given the priesthood, and he was able to. He was never able to go to the temple and get sealed to his family or have his endowments, but he was able to have the priesthood.
That's very interesting. I wasn't aware that he never got his endowments. Now, this individual here is also Mr. Bonner. He's also the one who brought us the documentary on His Name is Green Flake. And Green Flake, who's Green Flake as well, Julia?
So I'm not as familiar with Green Flake. I think he was a slave, if I'm not mistaken. But
yes, Green Flake was an enslaved person who came across on the plains, and he was one of very few saints in the Great Basin area in the 1840s, 1850s who was enslaved. And there's a documentary that was put out by him back in 2021 by the same individual. So we're going to get the same treatment here for Elijah Abel. And as we were discussing that this week, Julia, you brought up the fact that, you know, a lot of people bring out Elijah Abel as an example that Joseph Smith wasn't racist, that he was very progressive, and that he ordained Black persons to the priesthood, and that Joseph Smith was an example or a paradigm of what racial diversity should be, even though he only lived in the 1830s, 1840s, and that all of the racism in the church was brought to us by Brigham Young. And as we were discussing in the pre-show notes, that you had a slightly different take on that based on what we know about Elijah Abel from future generations of Latter-day Saints.
So there's a lot to go into with Joseph Smith's racism, but yeah, there's a researcher named Paul Reeves, and he did research on Elijah Abel, and he talks about how Joseph F. Smith, throughout the years, Joseph F. Smith sort of gave different responses as to why or what happened with Joseph Smith giving him the priesthood. And by 1908, he said that Joseph Smith himself had deemed Elijah Abel's priesthood as null and void. And so that's really problematic. And I'm just curious if this docuseries will shed any light on that. And
what we're probably going to see from this documentary is the same thing that we got from My Name is Green Flake. It's attempting to make a faith promoting story out of something that's incredibly problematic. I mean, Green Flake was an enslaved person. How do you find faith in talking about how early LDS leaders, were not only were they enslaving people, but Brigham Young brought Utah in as a slave territory when I believe that was in 1852 or so. How do you find faith in those type of situations? How do we turn Elijah Abel and his ordination and his lack of being able to go to the temple and achieve the higher ordinances, and even potentially having his priesthood be rescinded and not really being a full-fledged member? How do we turn these incredibly problematic church history items into faith promoting narratives? And that's what these documentaries do.
I think we're going to see some really heartfelt stories that are going to be really hard to watch. Because, for example, Green Flake, not only was he an enslaved person that came across the plains, he was given to the church as a way of paying the families back tithing. So, the church was complicit in continuing to treat him as a slave. So that's pretty horrible. I think the important thing is that the writer of the article, what was his name? Molly Bonner. I think the important thing for him was just being able to see people like him in media, which reading his article was really beautiful and really heartfelt. And I felt really sad for him because he's like, I finally got to learn about these Black ancestors who were pioneers, who went through all these hard things and were pioneers as well as being slaves. And that's horrible. And also, if I had known that there was Black people in the time of Joseph Smith, I would have had something to hold on to while being treated poorly with racism coming at him in the church. So he would have known, hey, I do have a place here because of the history of the church, even as he's being treated as if he doesn't have a place here because of the current racism within the church. I hated that.
So
I hate that for him, but that's the way it is. So I don't know. What do you think? We'll go watch it?
Probably. We watched the Emma and Jane Manning James, and that was really interesting.
It was very
it's
interesting.
I don't think it's all the way correct, but it's still good to see that in media.
It's amazing. I run another channel that's called the Mormon Movie Reviews, and I need to review those films. But it's amazing to see the church produced films and the church affiliated films. This is not an official church production here of the Elijah Abel docu-series, but it's amazing to see what you get with these films. You try to strip out anything that is paints the church in a negative light, emphasize only the faith promoting narrative so that anybody who watches it gets to somehow their testimony gets to be increased. No matter what we see in church history, no matter how bad things were, you can still build your testimony from watching these documentaries. And that's what I like to review on the Mormon Movie Reviews channel, which is every Monday night at 9:30 p.m. We dust off an old LDS classic. And I'm going to put both of these on my to-do list to review.
So one of the reasons that these are going to be faith promoting, even as they're terrible, is that if you have a good feeling by the end, that good feeling is then owned by the church. And they're going to say that's faith promoting. That good feeling you have is your confirmation that the church is true. Even if your good feeling is, oh, Green Flake went through this terrible life and then you got to have some sort of good resolution. Like that positive feeling you get that you can get from any movie that has a good resolution, they're going to say that's faith promoting. That the good feeling is the church is true.
Right, absolutely. Our next article here is from Gordon Monson, and he's that columnist over at the Salt Lake Tribune. And this one, again, is getting a lot of clicks here. Gordon Monson used to be a sports reporter, but now he covers LDS issues. And his takes are, I would say, very viral because they come from the heart. They're not sanitized, and they're very interesting. Gordon Monson, is it time for aging LDS apostles to pull a Pope Benedict and step aside? It's at least worth asking whether extending emeritus status to the top leaders could be a gift to them and to the church, infusing the faith with younger blood and fresher ideas. And as we know, the first presidency is the oldest one in history. They're all nonagenarians. President Nelson is going to be turning 100 years old in not that long from now. They're very, very old. And, we have emeritus status for the 70s, but we don't have emeritus status for the general authorities. Pope Benedict a couple of years ago, he stepped down when he was 85 years old. And even in the community of Christ, they've used emeritus status for even the president prophet for a number of years. And he asks the very important question here, is it time for there to be an infusion of younger blood within the church?
So I was just now thinking of the Community of Christ Church, where the prophet of that church, Stephen, I can't remember his last name. Starts with
Veazy, Veazy.
So he just stepped down, and then they're having another prophet come and step into his place. And so I think that's beautiful. And yes, watching this last general conference with Ballard, he was getting out there and he was really sick, and just watching him give his talk was very painful because he's like, I can't even see the teleprompter. This is really hard. And to me, it feels really cruel to have these elderly folks standing up there and kind of struggling through this. And we saw that with Monson too. And I think the November 2015 policy was kind of because of that. He wasn't all the way there, Monson. And so I just feel like it's really cruel to make them serve until they die.
The 2015 policy of exclusion in particular was probably rammed through because President Monson had dementia, and that was probably rammed through by President Nelson and President Oaks because these older leaders leave a power vacuum behind, and that will be filled by other people who want to push their particular agendas. And the November 2015 policy of exclusion ended up being rescinded because it was an incredibly harmful and bad idea from the very beginning. America, do you think it's time for emeritus status for LDS leaders? Would that be an improvement to our current situation?
I think that would be an incredible improvement to the situation because Nelson, 100 years ago, there was a full century ago that he was born. He is not up to date on current views. He's like, oh, the world goes here and we go here, and and they're following the world. But the elder men who are still running our church are not following very quickly. They're lagging behind, and they really need to catch up if they want to keep people in the church, keep the young people in the church, because it's the young people who are saying, hey, hold on, I have an LGBTQ friend. You're going to create these rules to keep them out of the church for what reason? If they can't keep up with the movement of the times, realizing that trans people, for example, are good and normal people. If you can't keep up with that, then you need to be pushed out. And I would love to see a whole new, just everybody under 40. That's not going to happen, and I don't expect it to happen. When I was reading this article, I was like, oh, I know why everybody's mad at him. There is no way they're going to support having Nelson pushed out.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, President Holland was in a coma for 3 weeks before he was ordained the president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. And President Nelson, he experienced an unfortunate fall, and he could not even attend the last General Conference, and he couldn't receive his award from Morehouse College for his famous peacemaker talk. And the fact that the general authorities, especially the First Presidency, they almost never leave Utah, it makes it almost impossible for them to be global faith leaders, since they really are too old to travel almost anywhere. And, you know, you talk about running a $300 billion mega corporation with people who are in their 90s. It is very difficult to do that. Any last thoughts, Julia, on emeritus status and the age of the senior leaders of the church?
I think that they should absolutely retire earlier and call younger people in. I 100% support that.
Break.
Yeah, be with your families, be with your grandkids. You they're so much of their time is taken up by the church that they're missing out on their families. So I 100% support that.
Absolutely. Now, if you want to get in touch with us, you know, we both have TikTok channels, Analyzing Mormonism and the Mormon News Roundup, and we're all both on Instagram as well. Leave us a comment and let us know if you think that it is time for aging LDS apostles to step aside. We'd be very grateful for that. Now, Gordon Monson also had one additional article which really gained a lot of traction this week, and it talked about doubt within the LDS faith. Now, what Gordon Monson in this particular article talks about is anyone who doesn't drink the Kool-Aid, anyone who is not a 100% true blue TBM believer, well, then he gets hate mail all the time that says, you know, some Latter-day Saints seem convinced that I'm and we're on the highway to hell. And because he asks sincere questions, just like we saw in that last article, even postulating a question about the church, you know, he said, is it time for LDS leaders to have emeritus status? Even that question, that gets a vicious response for him, and it divides the room. And it really brings up the issue of, is there a place within the church to have reasonable dialogue, to have questions about either church history or about current church policy or about theology? And what he basically says in his article is that he gets, you know, 4 clown face emojis, middle fingers, and he, you know, gets a vicious reaction just because he has the slightest question about church history and church policy. You know, is there a place within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to have a reasonable dialogue and to even postulate questions, not much less even doubts?
No.
I think that people have tried to create those spaces. I know John Dillon, when he started Mormon Stories, tried to be that space. Lindsay Henson Park, when she started her year of polygamy, she tried to be that space to question polygamy, but to stay in the church. Patrick Mason, I think, is trying to do a really good job of holding space for both things. I couldn't find a place in my community in the church to have questions and maintain belief. I don't know. Maybe some people succeed. I think most of all, they don't find that place.
It seems like questions are not tolerated within the faith, and that's really one of the benchmarks of a high demand religion, is the inability to question church leaders. You know, it comes back to that famous saying from President Oaks, who says that it's wrong to criticize leaders of the church, even if the criticism is true. And the crazy thing about Gordon Monson is that he does not criticize leaders of the church. He just asks questions. And that's the most amazing thing about his article, is it's not necessarily church criticism. He's just postulating reasonable questions about the church. And that is, you know, for a lot of true blue members, you can't even have the slightest question, the slightest doubt. There's no place for a dialogue within the church, which is why a lot of people gravitate to the internet, and it's a very polarizing environment. In your experience, America, did you ever bring up any doubts or any questions in the church setting? And was it a safe place to, you know, question your faith?
No, I would say that it was not a safe place to question things. If you're sitting in Elders Quorum or Relief Society and you've got questions, you want to raise your hands. They want questions that further their lesson. They do not want questions that make you actually question things. And when that happens, there is an awkward silence, and there is a discomfort that fills the room, and you learn not to do it. You learn to either not ask questions or ask the right questions that can further the conversation, or just to bear your testimony. That is the way to do it, really. The only way that I found answers to any questions myself was the internet.
And that's one of the great things, Julia, about the Analyzing Mormonism channel, is that a lot of times in your videos, you just ask the questions. You're not telling the viewer what to think, what to do, what to believe. You just put out the facts, put out the history, put out the research that you put into all of your videos, and then you ask the question that needs to be asked, and you let the viewers decide. That's what makes Analyzing Mormonism so great.
Thanks.
Okay, our next article here is from Tim Ballard and the OUR Rescue Program, which was supposedly there to rescue child sex trafficking. And he was the star of the Sound of Freedom movie back 2 summers ago. Well, he's been completely debunked and disgraced since that time. He's been excommunicated from the church, or his membership has been withdrawn. And there's been a number of lawsuits about him, including the latest one here. The plaintiff says that she has audio recordings that prove that OUR lied about sex slaves to raise money. Adam Herbert's from Fox 13 Salt Lake City. He's been the best reporter on Tim Ballard. And let's play a minute of this particular news and get your reactions.
There's not one right or wrong way to do, anti-trafficking work, but it's never rooted in like, look at me, I'm the hero.
Suzanne Whitehead has been working with human trafficking victims on and off for 14 years.
I care a lot about making sure that everything I do is honest.
That's why she's one of 9 people who have filed lawsuits against Tim Ballard and the nonprofit he used to run, Operation Underground Railroad. She says she has proof, audio recordings, showing they lied to the public about saving children.
We have no idea where the girls are. We have no idea.
She also sued Utah Attorney General Sean Reyes, saying he intimidated her and tried to silence her.
Who do you report it to if the Attorney General is in the middle of it?
I'm Fox 13 investigative reporter Adam Herpetz, and tonight Suzanne explains why she dropped her lawsuit against the Attorney General and why he has yet to earn her trust.
These recordings are going to be absolutely incredible. We literally have, you heard a part of that recording that says, we have no idea where the children are, and basically we're making this entire thing up. I cannot wait to hear the complete recordings from this lawsuit.
They said that there was 9 other lawsuits against Tim Ballard and OUR, and I think hers is the only one that's not a sexual allegation against him. She's saying, these stories are fake. These stories are made up, and she knew one of the girls personally that were presented on the website, and she was like, no, this is not true. So she called and then pushed record on her phone, and that's where she got these recordings. And so, yeah, I'm really, really interested to see. I think it was a full hour, if not more. And that'll be really, really interesting to see.
And America, what do you think about the Tim Ballard fiasco, the complete mess, and the fact that it has been unraveled? He's been sued many times for sexual assault, sexual harassment. Now we're seeing concrete evidence here of him grifting money. And of course, there's a huge LDS connection with the Tim Ballard, with the fact that M. Russell Ballard allegedly leaked the tithing records to wealthy donors to get wealthy Mormons to support Tim Ballard. And now we're seeing the entire thing is not only unraveled from the sexual improprieties and the reprehensible behavior, but the fact that they didn't rescue anyone. And we have recordings to prove that now. You wonder how this whole thing started and how it's all going to end.
So I am disappointed. Just like everybody who believes in the Sound of Freedom movie, I was sold. I didn't know Tim Ballard specifically, but I followed them on Facebook, and I still was following them. When Julia told me that this was happening, I was like, no, I know them, and they're good, and they rescue people, and like they share their stories, and like they rescue people, and this is important work that they're doing. And she's like, it's not what you think it is. And learning all of this has been really disheartening, because they were one of those stories like that makes you feel good about the world. Like, there are people out there rescuing children, and they're important, and I can like support them in some sort of way. And it's just a way of making you feel better about the world, even as you feel terrible about it, because the stories are awful. But now it's just like, well, crap, just the world has gone to pot, and the saviors went with it.
Yeah, and the crazy thing, Julia, about these allegations, about some of the Tim Ballard lawsuits, is that the evidence that has been provided for these lawsuits, unfortunately, it appears that some of it is being challenged in court, meaning that it wasn't obtained legally. His personal assistant, supposedly, Celeste Boris, supposedly took private information from Tim Ballard, which has been the basis for some of his lawsuits. And also, Tim Ballard's lawyers are saying that these recordings were obtained illegally because it was without his consent. So we get a lot of damning evidence for Tim Ballard, and I do wonder how much of it is going to be admissible in court, because if it's all admissible, it seems like it's a slam dunk. Any last thoughts on what we're seeing from Tim Ballard and lawsuit this week?
One thing that really struck me is I think she said that they say that their rescue missions cost $50,000 for each rescue mission, and she said that's not true. She said we could run on a budget of $3,000 a month, and so like, because him getting a hold of these millionaires or these high donors, like wealthy members of the church. Tim does not need that money. OUR does not need that money. And just hearing that from her was just like, where's the rest of the money going?
Yeah, Tim Ballard allegedly had a salary of, I think it was of around $500,000 plus his for-profit ventures, including the Spear Fund and the others. His compensation was well into the 7 figures, and his budget, according to these leaked documents, it says we can work on a monthly budget of $3,000, and that's because they really didn't do anything according to these allegations. All they did was go to strip clubs and VRBOs across the world in these far-flung locations where they would, bring in wealthy donors to be on these rescue missions and have photo ops like Sean Reyes and others. And the entire thing was basically in order to line Tim Ballard's pockets. And if these recordings are eventually able to see the light of day in a court of law, and that we can demonstrate that Tim Ballard didn't really rescue anyone and the entire thing was built on a sham, not only is he going to be facing the sexual harassment, sexual assault allegations, but he could be facing grifting allegations of, raising this money for an illicit purpose. Tim Ballard is in a world of hurt. The other things that are trending this week is the Jubilee Mormons debate. That thing is still really percolating out there. And this was an incredibly viral debate, which took place on the Jubilee platform, which is basically kind of like a debate platform where you're trying to find middle ground, and it asks controversial questions, brings people in from both sides of a subject. And they were discussing a number of contemporary issues in Mormonism, including whether masturbation is sinful, whether the church is harmful or to women, whether women have equality in the church, and a bunch of other issues. And we had a number of prominent ex-Mormons and a number of prominent Mormons on each side. It was 4 and 4. And there's still a lot of fallout from that because those videos were viewed millions of times. I mean, way more than Analyzing Mormonism and the Mormon News Roundup combined. This is really what people are going to watch, that Jubilee stuff, which is why you released a reaction video to the Jubilee debate this week, Julia. Let's play that and get your reactions from both of you on what you think about this incredibly viral debate.
The episode with Mormons versus ex-Mormons, I learned a lot about the church from the Mormons. Number 1, prophets are a product of their environment.
At the same time, I understand that people are also products of their environment. Codified.
And that their revelations will only fall in line with the societal norm, which to me means that they don't actually speak to God.
The world is here, and we're more conservative here. We're not going to do what the world does. As the world progresses, cultures change. They go here, and then we go here, and then they go here, and we go here. And before long, you look up, and we're perilously close where we would never have thought to be before. So I've said too much.
Number 2, the Book of Mormon was mistranslated.
There are many idioms that are mistranslated.
Codified.
Which is interesting because I thought it was the most correct of any book on earth. Number 3, Nephi was racist.
You're saying Nephi was racist, but not God.
I'm saying possibly codified.
Certainly, it couldn't have been the fact that Joseph Smith was racist. Number 4, there are 2 different churches, one with the big C and one with the little c. One is good and one is bad. And the bad one will publicly criticize LGBTQ individuals.
To very quickly delineate between the church with a little c and a church with a big C. I will tell you the church with a big C and its codified doctrines is loving to all, gives an eternal, immeasurable value to every soul, and views you first as a child of God, not as a gay man, not as an ex-husband to a woman or a current husband to a man. It sees you as who you are. With that said, we all have really cringy, awkward friends who've said incorrect, sometimes maybe even cruel things to LGBTQ members, justified by false conceptions of God or misinterpretations of doctrine. And their bigotry they have tried to couch in religious writ or religious culture, and that is wrong simultaneously.
The following clips are for educational purposes only, and I do not agree with them.
If children have a happy family experience, they will not want to be homosexuals, which I am sure is an acquired addiction, just as drugs, alcohol, and are.
Worlds without end, the homosexual cannot be exalted.
Number 5, the prophet doesn't actually speak to God. He just receives revelation. And a 99-year-old man whose grandparents were polygamist is probably not the best option.
Like, do you believe he talks to God?
The value of the prophet is look at the people.
But he talks directly to God.
Sometimes,
face to face, maybe. I don't know.
But like God tells him the truths that he needs to know for the world today is what you believe.
We're talking about a beautiful cosmic entity that is Heavenly Father trying to channel information through a 99-year-old man in Salt Lake City.
But he does, yes?
Oh, yeah, to you as well.
Yeah, but it gets...
So am I a prophet?
I don't know, are you?
Codified.
Modern apostles are called to be witnesses of the name of Christ in all the world. This is not to witness of a personal manifestation.
And the last one, the church is going to change its stance on LGBTQ issues because gay people aren't going anywhere and Mormons aren't going anywhere.
And the future of LGBT relations and the church, I'm excited to see what happens because clearly something's going to happen.
If I'd have known all these things years ago, I would have had my faith crisis much sooner. I don't know how people stay in the church after learning these things.
Okay, these edits are absolutely pure, Julia. Those edits are perfect.
I was worried I was a little too mean to Cardin, but like if it was a 50-minute segment and he said codified like 6 times, and they're all in there.
It was his new favorite word. I don't blame him. You got to practice using it so you know how to use it in regular conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And America, what did you learn from watching the Jubilee debate?
I learned that these members of the church, so Cardin and Kwaku, so Kwaku, I appreciate him. He's a really good guy, and I hope to see him on the other side soon because he is putting things together that he's going to realize don't match up. Cardin is, I don't like him. I'm sorry, Cardin. If you watch this, do better.
Yeah, I noticed that you put in that couple of clips there from Bon J. Featherstone and Hartman Rector Jr. That Hartman Rector Jr. clip was taken out of the Ensign because of its harmful nature. In fact, I believe he was interviewed from the New York Times or a couple of other newspapers because that really went global out there. And he said, well, the church doctrine is what it is. And they took it out of the Ensign because they want to be politically correct, but the doctrine is still true. So that was a very, very viral moment. I'm not sure about the Featherstone, whether that was taken out or not. I'm not sure about that one.
I don't know. He said a lot of really problematic things. And those are just 2 clips of a whole long list. On the record from Latter-day Stories, they have this document of all the troublesome things that the prophets have said in the past and the teachings that they've had. So like, these were just 2 examples that I pulled. It goes on and on and on.
And on the record is a PDF here. And this was really honestly a life-changing PDF document when I was able to read this for the first time, which talks about all of the history of the church with the number of harmful messages that have been said over the years from the church. I remember when I first read this particular clip, and that was really life-changing for me. So it was incredible to see what the church has said to the LGBTQ community over the years. And we got to see more of that really in that particular debate between Cardin in particular, saying that he would, quote, trade a little bit of gayness in order for his leukemia to be cured. And that was incredibly viral. And a lot of people have reacted to that one. You made a video there, Julia, which responded to Timber, which was one of the active Mormons in particular, who is gay and still a member of the church. And I want to play that particular clip here and get your thoughts on why you released a video specifically for Timber and what your thoughts are about him being gay in the church.
Do I believe that Heavenly Father would keep her out of the celestial kingdom if she
If she continues to have lesbian relationships through her entire life and doesn't repent for them?
Yes, I believe that. Yes, but
he'll keep her out of heaven. Celestial kingdom.
Yes, we all have a standard that we need.
She won't be able to live with her family forever, which is the Mormon promise.
No, but that's
because
of the doctrine of eternal.
Hold on. Keep going.
I mean, I believe Jesus is clear in the scriptures that there is a certain way to be able to return to the Father.
This is the 5th edition of the New Oxford Annotated Bible, and it is arguably the best translation of the Bible that we have today. What I'm about to show you is every single verse in which Jesus Christ condemns homosexuality.
Why did you feel the need, Julia, to respond directly to Timber and his LGBTQ assertions from the Jubilee Mormons?
Well, this is a topic that's close to me because I came out as lesbian and my family has been very distant from me. They've pretty much shunned me or shut me out. And I really don't like when people put words into Jesus's mouth, and that's what Timber is doing. He's saying Jesus taught these things, but when you look at the text, when you look at even in the worst translation of the Bible, which is, I think, the King James Version, Jesus is silent on the matter of homosexuality. The Book of Mormon is silent. The Doctrine and Covenants is silent. It just really, really bothers me. So I just wanted to respond to that specifically.
I just feel really bad for him. I feel really, really bad for his wife. My previous marriage was very similar to that situation.
You mean being in a mixed orientation marriage?
Yes, being in a mixed orientation marriage and trying to make it work because of the gospel. I find in my experience that the most homophobic people are the people who are trying to restrain their own selves and their own identity for the reasons that they think that they need to. Timber we already know that he's gay, so he's not hiding anything. So we can say this. He's being homophobic. He is saying you cannot go to heaven if you're gay, if you are living the way that Jillian is, or we are. He would say to you probably, you will not be going to heaven, and according to the church, that's exactly right. I don't know. I just feel bad for him in the way that he has to jump through hoops to say to himself, you're a bad person if you're gay. And that was my least favorite part of Cardin's speech. And my most favorite part of Jillian's speech is when she said, stop you right there. Comparing being gay to having cancer is incredibly wrong, because we can be gay and have a beautiful, happy life, and nobody's ready to die. I don't know.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have time to talk about it this week, but Timber actually went on Jacob Hansen Thoughtful Faith podcast to talk about his mixed orientation marriage, and he took direct aim, especially at ex-Mormon lesbian mothers. Unfortunately, we don't have time for that particular clip there, but yeah, he continues to basically wage war against ex-Mormon gay members of the church, and that's one reason that he's a very polarizing figure. So we'll be following what's happening with the Jubilee fallout here on the Mormon News Roundup. And this is not the only gay issue that has really been raised in the church here this week. There's just so much in the news that happens every single week. And that's David Archuleta, the former American Idol runner-up, I believe it was in 2011, who stepped away from the church, I believe in around 2018, or maybe it was a little bit later after that. But he used to be the poster child for the church. He sang with the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. He sang at President Ballard's wife's funeral. He was featured in Deseret Book. He used to be the poster child for what it's like to be gay in the church and stay in the church, be faithful, and say, hey, I can make it all work somehow. Well, he stepped away from the church, and he's starting to become more vocal in, shall we say, I don't know if it's criticism of the church, but he's starting to become more comfortable as a non-Mormon, openly gay adult. I want to play this clip for you and get your reaction to what's going on with David Archuleta, because he's one probably, you have Charlie Bird, you have Ben Shalati, and then you have David Archuleta as some of the most famous Mormon. Not that you guys aren't famous, but as some of the most. They have hundreds of thousands of followers. Not that you guys aren't. I'm not trying to disparage you, but let's watch this clip and get your reaction to David Archuleta becoming more comfortable as the person that he says that he's been all along.
Okay, this will be the last video that I make, and then I'll let this go into the grave. But I think the reason why I had a slight freak out and haven't even been able to sleep the last couple of nights is because this is all new to me. Like, I grew up very conservative, and not only did you not talk about this kind of stuff like adult humor, sexuality, you're not even supposed to consider thinking about it. Like, you're not even supposed to think. If it comes into your mind, you're supposed to just shut it down. If some of y'all have seen the Book of Mormon musical, that song, Turn It Off, like, it's real. Like, that's a real thing for Mormons. So to have gone there this week, even though it was unintentional, but to like make a TikTok that actually was like a sexual, I guess not sexual. I mean, your body doesn't always have to be sexual. Sometimes but it was just such a big no-no all my life to even discuss. So to have brought it up to the table in front of everyone in public, it was just like, my brain is saying, what are you doing? You're not supposed to be here. You're not supposed to be to like transition into being okay to talk about this stuff. It's like, I'm growing up in front of everybody. And it's like, wait, David, but some of y'all are like, we're the same age, and this is like high school and college stuff, or maybe it's even middle school for y'all, people who are younger than me. They're like, we've already, like, that was years ago for us, but for me, it's right now. And it's kind of a strange place to be, especially in front of people, especially after people have seen me and have known about me for 15 years, maybe at this point. Also, I realized I cut my fingers, so that's what that is. But it's like a liberating experience, but it does freak my brain out because my brain was so used to just being locked up with that kind of stuff. It was about being squeaky clean. And I really lived that, like I lived shutting down my brain. It was easy for me to do because I'd done it all my life, and now it's opening up, and it's just a bit wild for me, but it's also liberating and freeing and exciting to finally feel like, yeah, I'm growing up, having these adult pangs and just living life. Anyway, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I'm going to let this go now.
Being the fact that I am a straight white Mormon male, it's hard for me to put myself into the shoes of David Archuleta and what he has gone through. And the fact that he's been such a public person, he really shielded himself from the public eye. And I think it took him a lot longer to come to grips with who he was. I'm kind of psychoanalyzing here, but he hid it under wraps because as he said that he was becoming more open about his sexuality, about his sexual orientation, he started to lose followers, especially in the Morador, because even though his music doesn't change, it has really nothing to do with it. When he started saying that he was gay and stepping away from the church, he lost revenue. So it was difficult for him. And I'm sure that this is something that you guys can probably relate to much better than I can.
Yes, I love David Archuleta.
Yeah, he's so sweet. He's so pure. I do think to some degree, like even as a straight white whoever, like you are still having to turn off many parts of yourself to stay in the church. Like so many things. And like you'd mentioned about him maybe being critical of the church. And I think one of the things that David has done is that he's just asked good questions where he's like, what about adoption? What about monogamy within a same-sex marriage? And he's just asking questions that I don't think the leaders of the church have actually processed, maybe because they're as a nonagenarians. Like, I don't know. Like he's just asking really good questions. So
he's been such a public face of the LGBTQ community for so long. The fact that he is coming out now and saying, he's releasing videos which talk about him being in same-sex relationships, either going on dates or, having romantic contact with people of the same gender. That's been incredibly liberating for him. And you can just see the vulnerability that's inside of David Archuleta. And the fact that also his mother has also recently said that she has stepped away from the church because of the church's stance on LGBTQ issues. You're seeing, are we going to see that type of thing with other LGBTQ members? I would imagine that we would. What's your last thoughts here, America, on David Archuleta and his coming to grips with who he is and being more comfortable as an openly gay ex-Mormon?
Well, I'm happy for him. Obviously, I didn't go through the same thing that he's going through with the public eye, but I did go through what he's going through with shifting from this perfect person into kind of accepting yourself and experiencing yourself, your own mind, even as I allowed myself to find out who I was and what I really believed about the world. I had to eventually talk to my family about what I was going through, and I have always been the good daughter. We were both the
Nephi's of the family.
We were the Nephi's of the family. We were the straight A students. We were the good kids. And to suddenly we're actually both the black sheep now because of choosing to be in a lesbian relationship. So it is hard mostly to make the decision. Making the decision to do that is extremely hard and terrifying. And I cried a lot. On the other side, it's there's almost like a high to feeling loved and accepted for who you actually are. Not only you, but like those of my family members who did say, hey, that's totally fine. And we love you and we'll keep coming to Thanksgiving. I felt so much love for them and the love that they had for me, and my relationship with them bloomed like I had never ever had it in my entire life. So I'm excited for him and the journey that he's going through. He probably is already in that spot and feeling that love and acceptance from those who stuck around. And I wasn't like a super David Archuleta fan previously, but I am now.
Well, maybe he can make up for his ticket sales with the ex-Mormon community as he becomes more open about what he's doing in his own personal life. So we'll be watching David Archuleta, see what's going to go on with him, because he's still a big figure out there. Now, that does remind me, we got 2 last articles to take us through, and that's an interesting poll came out here, guys, this week, which really got my attention, and it was from the Religion News Service over Jana Reese, who we had on the Mormon News Roundup just 2 episodes ago. And this is a cell phone data which has indicated how many Mormons are actually in church every week in the United States. This is a fascinating look here that is data driven, no more speculations, because a couple of Mr. Pope here and a couple of others in a new study, which was from the B.H. Roberts Foundation, found that 71% of Mormons who live in LDS areas of the U.S. attend church weekly, and 65 attend church who live outside of that. But this study in particular really debunks that, because what we found in these particular surveys is that when Latter-day Saints are asked about their church attendance, they tend to exaggerate how often they go to church. But cell phone data, they track the people on their cell phones. They know if they're at church or not. There's no more lying that's associated with it, because a large firm bought like 200,000 cell phones, and they went and looked at where people were at church, and they could figure out if they're Hindu, if they're Mormon, if they're or no religion whatsoever. And this was a very important revelation, that what people claim if they're Latter-day Saints is completely different than what they do. Now, Julia, I tried to imitate you on putting together these 3-minute videos on, giving us a good indication of these. I'm so inspired by Julia. It's ridiculous here. So I've tried to do what you do. It's not quite as good as you, but I want to get your thoughts on my video that I put together that summarizes this cell phone data information.
Often Mormons actually attend church? It's a question that might have crossed your mind. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, more commonly known as the Mormon faith, places great emphasis on regular church attendance. It's seen as a cornerstone of their community, a time for reflection, learning, and fellowship. But just how many of its members are walking through those church doors every week? Well, recent studies have shed some light on this intriguing question. Economist Devin Pope took an innovative approach to answer this question. Using the modern marvel of technology, Pope decided to delve into the world of cell phone data, tracking the attendance patterns of members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This method offered a unique, unbiased perspective, providing a window into the actual church attendance, as opposed to the self-reported numbers. Now, traditionally, self-reported church attendance among U.S. Mormons is quite high, with nearly 87% of the members claiming to attend church weekly. However, Pope's study painted a slightly different picture. Utilizing the gathered cell phone data, he found that only about 1/3 of LDS members actually attend church on a weekly basis. That's a significant discrepancy, wouldn't you say? But don't let this disparity cast a shadow on the dedication of Mormons. Despite the difference between reported and actual attendance, Mormons still stand out as some of the most committed churchgoers in America. Their dedication to their faith and community is evident, even when viewed through the lens of data science. And this isn't just about the numbers, it's about understanding the patterns, the behaviors, and the commitment of a community to their faith. Such an understanding helps us appreciate the depth of their dedication, even as it challenges our preconceived notions of religious observance. But that's not all Pope's study revealed. Beyond church attendance, the study also uncovered some unexpected findings. It seems that when Mormons do attend church, they spend more time there compared to other religious groups. This suggests a level of dedication and commitment that goes beyond simply showing up. Moreover, the study highlighted some interesting social behaviors. Mormons, it seems, have lower rates of visiting strip clubs and liquor stores. This aligns with the church's teachings on modesty and sobriety, offering a fascinating glimpse into how religious beliefs can influence lifestyle choices. Yet another intriguing finding was the economic diversity within Mormon congregations. The study found that these congregations were less economically diverse compared to other religious groups. This could point to a shared socioeconomic background among Mormons, or perhaps to a tendency to congregate with those of similar financial standing. These findings give us a richer, more nuanced picture of the Mormon faith community. They reveal a group that is not just deeply committed to their faith, but also one that lives out its values in daily life. So while the question of how often Mormons attend church has a surprising answer, the study also reveals the unique characteristics of the Mormon faith community.
Okay, Julia, what do you think? I'm trying to imitate analyzing Mormonism. How did I do?
I think that was great. You should do a whole docu-series. You should just pick a subject and make a whole documentary about it. That was really good.
Okay, thanks so much. Now let's talk about America, about what it actually said. So in surveys, 87% of Mormons say, yeah, I go to church every single week, but it found out that the data, only less than a third of them do. What they tell the researchers is completely different than what we see in reality.
Well, yeah, you're gonna say that you go to church every week if you see yourself as an active member. It's the less active people that don't go every week. So
Yeah, we're seeing a significant amount of people who do not go to church. If you think about the United States, because this only tracks cell phone data in the United States, I believe that the church has approximately 8 million members in the United States. So if only a third of them go to church on any given Sunday, what is that, to 2.5 million, maybe a little over 2.5 million Mormons in the United States? That's an incredibly small piece of the pie. That's less than 1%. I think the US population is something like 340 million or something like that. We're talking about a very small minority of people. So it's funny that you see these articles like this in the Deseret News. Is trying to paint the church in a good light and say, look at all of our members. They go to church for longer than other people do, because typically, you're at church for a long period of time and there's a great level of faithfulness. But if you look at the data underneath, it's not so quite a rosy of a picture. Any last thoughts on Mormon church attendance, Julia, in the United States?
I would want to point out they're the least diverse places of worship, because they're putting together people in their own communities, and your own communities tend to be people who are similar to you. It's the same thing that happens with gerrymandering and housing and all of those things. So I'd point out you're less likely to be exposed to somebody in a different financial bracket than you, a different race than you, a different culture than you. So we're less likely to go to strip club or liquor stores, but I thought it was pretty funny that they're still just as likely to be in a casino. I thought that was pretty funny.
These are only stock images. It's an imperfect science. I'm still getting better at it. I don't have quite as many of these 3-minute videos as you do, so I'm still working on my craft. I know some of those Mormon images, you can tell they're not Mormons. I get that. There's only so many stock images of Mormons that I can put together, but I think it gives a pretty good visual representation of the article. And so you've inspired me, so I guess I'm trying to do. Now, the difference between our videos, by the way, Julia, is I don't have the big, beautiful eyes that you have and the incredible hair. So these are going to be more voiceovers. So maybe, it's not quite as good as yours, but I'm creeping up on you just a little bit.
No, that's good. Yeah.
Was that your voice?
No, that was not my voice. I don't have the voice that you guys have either. So that was a voice generation as well.
She has a really good voiceover voice. Yeah.
I don't have a face made for video, and I don't have a voice made for podcasting. That makes it difficult. I guess that's why I have so few subscribers. Now, a couple last articles. Our last article here is the church has released its holdings for Ensign Peak. Every quarter, the church releases how much money is in its investment fund, and we now have from Matthew Fox in BusinessInsider.com. The Ensign Peak stock portfolio is covered not just within Utah and in the Intermountain West, but since the church owns so much stocks, it's covered in Bloomberg, the Wall Street Journal. It's covered all over the place. And now we know what the church's top 10 holdings of the church's $51 billion stock portfolio is. Now, the $51 billion, that's a significant caveat, because that's only the U.S. portion of Ensign Peak Advisors. The church owns a significant amount in non-U.S. stocks, in private equities, in foreign investments, in real estate, in stocks, in bonds, and things that are not necessarily reported to the government. So that's just a caveat there. But the church revealed in its 13F filings, which was released just this last Wednesday, how much the church has, and these are the top 10 stock portfolios, and it's pretty incredible what the church owns here. And can I get you to read what number 10 is?
Yeah, it's Tesla.
Tesla, right? Elon Musk. The Mormon Church and Elon Musk, bosom friends. They both own hundreds of billions of dollars. So yeah, I do own a Tesla. I'm a big Tesla fan. So yeah, Tesla. And how about number 9?
Yeah, JP Morgan.
Yes, they own $700 million of JP Morgan. That's an incredible amount of stocks. Yeah. How about number 8, America?
MasterCard. That makes me question some things.
Like, do we need to change our cards?
I don't own a MasterCard. I don't know. Do you guys own MasterCard or?
I have, yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, MasterCard is doing very, very well. You know, the church owns $800 million worth of stock in it. Or how about number 7, Julia?
Yeah, United Health Group.
Yeah, that I believe that's a big HMO there that has a huge number of patients and things. That's in multiple states in the United States. And we also have number 6.
Meta platforms.
Right, the parent company for Facebook. The church owns $1 billion in Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg, one of the richest men on earth. I think he's in the top 5 or maybe even the top 10 at least. And the church owns a huge amount of stocks in that. Or number 5.
What is NVIDIA?
Now, they do cell phones mostly in developing countries. They're kind of like cheap cell phones in developing countries. So that's what you get from them. And you also have number 4, which is Amazon. The church owns $1.4 billion in Amazon. That's just a huge amount of money, even though Amazon has gone down just a little bit. And number 3, who do we have?
Alphabet?
Right, the parent company for Google. The church owns almost $2 billion in that. And number 2?
Apple.
Yes, almost $3 billion in Apple. Just incredible how much the church has in that, even though Apple stock has gone down 5% recently. And finally, the number 1 stock that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints owns is
Microsoft.
Microsoft. $3 billion in Microsoft. It's just incredible how much the church owns. Is it a surprise to you at all to see what kind of companies that the church is investing in?
I was kind of surprised. I was like, oh, okay.
Where's the moral value in owning stock in Google and Meta and Apple? Like, I understand they own a lot of property in the United States, and I had understood it had something to do with like gathering Zion and that kind of thing, but I have no idea how they can write this off as a prophecy.
Yeah, I don't think that this has much to do with theology or prophecy or church doctrine at all. All this is in is who does the church think is going to be the best investment to bring returns and additional returns on the Ensign Peak stock portfolio. And they're going with a lot of the tried and true big name out there, big companies out there, the biggest movers in the market, the companies that are worth valuations of hundreds of billions of dollars. The church is right there. Now, the Widow's Mite report released just this last week a complete deep dive into this. We don't have time to go through all this, but it's very interesting. If you go into the Widow's Mite report, you see that the church owns $51 billion in stocks, but the Ensign Peak lagged the market by 4% in 2023. So if Ensign Peak Advisors, if they had just taken the money and invested it into the S&P 500, they would have earned $2 billion more. But because they used their own weighting system, you know, they bought more stocks out of this company. They bought a little less here, a little bit more here. They didn't buy in some of the so-called, maybe some of the sin stocks. They didn't get the proper rate of return because they didn't follow the S&P 500. And the Widow's Mite report also talks about how the church is invested in a few sin stocks. You know, I'm talking about coffee or casinos or some of the sin stocks out there. The church, you got to read the Widow's Mite report. We don't have time to go through it, but the total investments from the Widow's Mite report, again, we said that the $51 billion is only in the domestic, in the U.S. stock market, but the total amount of investments, according to Widow's Mite report, is almost $200 billion, $182 billion in Ensign Peak. It's just crazy how much the church owns.
Yeah.
Dang. Oh, they're so rich.
Yeah, and then the land, they're selling land in Missouri and they're buying up land in Florida and Nevada.
Hawaii.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hawaii. Yeah. It's crazy.
All over the place.
Yeah, it is absolutely crazy. And that's why the Salt Lake Tribune posted this as well. The LDS Church Investment Fund takes another jump as the faith estimated total wealth reaches an all-time high, $182 billion. It's just crazy how much the church owns here. And this is my last little video on this.
Do you think the world's religious institutions are? It's a question that might surprise you with its answer. Around the globe, religious institutions hold considerable financial clout, often amassed through centuries of donations, investments, and property ownership. Let's zoom in on one specific example: the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This church has an investment arm, Ensign Peak Advisors, which has seen its portfolio value skyrocket. By the close of 2023, it had surpassed $50 billion, but that's not all. The total wealth of the church is a staggering figure, In 2023, it was estimated to be around $265 billion. To put that into perspective, that's more than the GDP of most countries in the world. Intriguingly, the church's investment income now exceeds its tithing and donation revenue. The wealth of the LDS Church did not amass overnight. It's a tale of strategic growth and resilience. Picture this. The beginning of 2023, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints investment arm, Ensign Peak Advisors, had a portfolio valued at around $44 billion. Fast forward to December of the same year, their portfolio had swelled by an impressive $6.1 billion. Now let's put that into perspective. That's an increase equivalent to the entire GDP of some smaller nations, all in a single year. The total investments managed by Ensign Peak, a staggering $182 billion, but the journey hasn't been without its hurdles. Cast your mind back to early 2020, when financial markets worldwide took a nosedive. Amid the chaos, Ensign Peak's investments did not just survive, they thrived. Resilient and robust, they rebounded significantly, inching ever closer to their peak value. A strong testament to strategic investment, wouldn't you agree? Let's delve deeper into where the LDS Church has placed its investments. The portfolio is diversified and robust, featuring some of the world's leading companies. Think Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and Google. These are not just household names, but powerhouses of the global economy, and the LDS Church has stakes in each one. It's a fascinating blend of faith and finance, demonstrating the church's adaptability and foresight in navigating an ever-changing economic landscape.
Okay, my clickbait title on that particular video is the LDS Church's $150 billion investment fund. Triumph of frugality or hoarding the widow's mite? What do y'all think?
How much are they donating to people in need? How much are they donating to charity at all? Probably not very much. Like compared to what they have and what they could be giving, they're not giving. I don't even know if it's percent.
No, probably not.
Yeah.
It's a very, very small percent of its total wealth. You know, the church's valuation is somewhere in the neighborhood of $265 billion. And this last year, the church, according to its own internal report, gave away about $1 billion. And if you strip out the fast offering of that, which is basically a pass through, because all of the fast offering is just kept at the local level. One member gives to the church who gives immediately to another member. If you strip out the fast offering, the church in the last year gave around $200 million. So you have a valuation of 265, you gave away 200 billion. That's only a ratio of, what is that? That's a very small rate. Is that 1 out of 100? Or yeah, it's a very small ratio, less than 1 cent. It's extremely small.
In like 5 or 7 years, there'll be $1 trillion church, something like that. Yeah, and also like they pointed out, or you pointed out in that video, that they don't need tithing. They can just work off of what they have with what they've already got or their investments. They don't need tithing. The church does not need tithing. And it reminds me of past prophets, Joseph Fielding or Joseph F. One of them said that
Joseph F. Smith.
We will see the day when we will no longer have to ask a single dollar from our members because we'll have enough tithing. So
we see that day, but yet they are still asking.
Yeah, that day has come and gone, and yet they're still asking. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. That was 1907. We expect to see the day where we will not need to ask for 1 additional cent from the members. And we definitely have reached that day. If you look back at David Bednar in the 2022 May National Press Club briefing, he was asked about Ensign Peak and about tithing in particular. And he said, and this is almost a direct quote, the church doesn't need the members tithing, end quote, anymore. And that is for sure because the church grew in valuation this last year, $30 billion. But the church's overall operating budget is only around $7 billion. So you don't need tithing in any way, shape, or form. So this is just incredible to see the church continuing to grow Ensign Peak. And this is one of the most fascinating issues for me personally. This is something I really, I'm kind of geeked out about, and I really like to follow it a lot. So if you're into that, you will enjoy liking and subscribing to the Mormon News Roundup. And don't forget analyzing Mormonism as well. If you could leave us a 5-star review, we'd be very grateful for that. Now, our final article of the week here is the Super Bowl. Guys, did you watch the Super Bowl here this last week?
We do not follow sports at all. We don't. We follow Taylor Swift. Yeah.
Okay, fair. And that was what's amazing is in the Super Bowl, not everybody follows it, but if you combine the Super Bowl with Taylor Swift, I guess this was the most watched event in human history. I think it was somewhere over 100 million people watched it, which was more than the moon landing. This was the single most watched event in human history. Now, I don't watch a lot of sports either, guys, but there's something about having a Y chromosome around the time of the Super Bowl that some kind of a genetic urge just gets into me. I don't watch a lot of NFL. I don't watch a lot of college football, but I got to turn it on. There's something genetic. I don't know what it is about it. But the most incredible thing is in this Super Bowl, there's an incredible Mormon connection in the Super Bowl that I wanted to highlight and get you guys' opinion on, because Andy Reid, first of all, the coach of the Kansas City Chiefs who won the Super Bowl, he's a big time Mormon. He's an active Latter-day Saint who talks a lot about his faith. And the most amazing thing here is this is what Hank Smith tweeted out here with regards to the Super Bowl here. I just want to get your tongue-in-cheek reaction to this. And this is, he said, wait, I thought the church sold a bunch of land in Missouri. Does Hank really think winning the Super Bowl is a fulfillment of LDS prophecy? Ooh, let's check it out. Hank Smith, he's kind of a Latter-day Saint troll. It's hard to know if he's actually being serious on this stuff. But he says, according to Doctrine and Covenants, section 84, the New Jerusalem will be in Jackson County, Missouri. Right? And Arrowhead Stadium, guys, guess what? That's in Jackson County, Missouri. The Super Bowl was held in Jackson County. And according to Revelations 21, verse 15, and he that talked with me had a golden reed to measure the city. Andy Reid, the coach there, he's seen, this is Mormon prophecy fulfilled here. What do you think?
I hope he's joking.
That's clever.
I think he's definitely joking. Now, Andy Reid is a big-time Mormon, and you know the quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs, he's also got a Mormon connection, which a lot of people don't know about. You know, he was put out there, he was trotted out by the church for the giving machines to plug back in last December. He's basically brought on as a spokesperson to encourage people to make donations to the church. So not only does the head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs, is he a big-time Mormon, but Travis Kelce, the winning quarterback, he also had a Mormon connection. It's incredible how much Mormon stuff is surrounding the Super Bowl.
Apparently they know where to invest their time and money, so...
Yes, they definitely do. And that really got me thinking this week. And this takes us to our final segment here, which is the Mormon News Roundup Poll of the Week. And we release all of our episodes live every Sunday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you come on over to our live chat, you can interact with your humble hosts at that time. And I put together a Mormon News Roundup Poll of the Week, which talks about the Super Bowl here, guys. I want you to be the first persons to take our poll. And it's the Super Bowl edition 2024. And what is the subject of the poll this week? What is the question that the poll is asking us?
What did Travis Kelce tell Andy Reid on the sidelines in the Super Bowl?
I've noticed that this went viral because Travis Kelce bumped into the coach in kind of a heated exchange in the middle of the Super Bowl. And that really went viral. And since, guys, they both have an LDS connection, I'm figuring that they probably were talking about something that was church related. That's just my estimation. I put together a couple of memes and I'd like you to read them, you know, rate my memes on a 1 to 10. You know, I can take the criticism. If it's not a good meme, you can let me know. We're going to go through the top 10 things that I think that they were talking about. I could be right. I could be wrong, but let's run through these memes and you can tell me if you think that this is what they were talking about. Let's start with number 1.
Jesus wants me for a sunbeam.
What do you think, Julia?
Sure.
1 to 10, what do you think on that meme?
I don't know. I mean, it's good. It's
Okay.
my favorite.
I like that's that is how sunbeams say that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, if you listen to the primary programs, they sometimes there's always one that gets a little too excited in the primary programs. Okay, that was a miss. That's okay. I got 10. We'll find one for you. Or how about number 2, Julia? Will you read that one?
Oh yeah. Think celestial. Yeah.
Very inspiring.
Uh-huh.
What do you think about that one, America?
I hate that thing.
Okay.
Good
What
meme.
does it mean?
Okay, I'm 0 for 2, but that's okay. I've got 8 more for you. That may be a miss. That's President Nelson's inspired counsel from the last General Conference, where he encouraged everyone to think celestial, which is kind of similar to keep, sweet, pray, and obey, but we won't get into that for this podcast. Or how about number 3?
It's none of your freaking business how I found out if he's taking the sacrament.
Oh, that's controversial. That's hitting too close to home.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, that's also a miss. I personally like this one, but I can tell my audience maybe that's not the right audience for this one. That's okay. That's all right. How about number 4? Julia can read this one.
It's better that one man should perish than an entire nation dwindle in unbelief. Yeah, sure.
Could be.
Guy, like,
Well,
Nephi, yeah.
he's very upset. That's what Nephi told Laban right before he took action. I'm not sure about
Maybe
that.
that's how the angel responded to Nephi. Like,
Definitely could be. Or how about number 5, America? Can you read that one?
What a thing it is for a man to be accused of committing adultery and having 7 wives when I can only find one.
Yeah.
Oh, yep. Nope. That's a good quote. Yeah.
Okay, good one. That's the best I've got so far. So far, I've got the number 5 is good. That's I'm gonna take any win that I can in this situation. Or how about number 6, Julia?
the only men who become gods, even the sons of gods, are those who enter into polygamy. Ooh, that's problematic.
Okay, that one's a miss too. That's the famous Brigham Young saying, okay, that one's a miss. That's no problem. I got a couple more. America?
It's wrong to criticize leaders of the church, even if the criticism is true.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I like that one.
Okay, I got a 2 thumbs up on that. That one is good. Okay, I got at least 1 in here. That's good. That's pretty good. That's not bad for me. Or how about number 8?
I'm telling you, both the plane engines exploded. We went into a death spiral. I almost died. Wait, I really like that one.
Okay, I got a really good one. This is good. Excellent. Okay, not bad. You have to know your inside Mormon jokes to get some of these, right? Yeah, okay, good job. Or how about number 9, America?
How many times do I have to tell you the City Creek Mall was paid for with invested reserves, not tithing?
How many times do I have to tell you this?
You know that mall, the roof opens? Like, who needs a mall with an opening roof?
Jesus needs a mall with an opening roof.
Yeah. Right. Okay, that's one of my favorites. Or finally, number 10, Julia.
Oh, Analyzing Mormon is the best LDS related content on the web.
Maybe that's what they were talking about. Like I said, these two have a big time Mormon connection. I'm pretty sure they were talking about something LDS related. I could be wrong about that. But if you come on over to our live chat, you can cast your votes at this time. And America, could you be the first person to take our poll? What did Travis Kelce tell Andy Reid on the sidelines of the Super Bowl last Sunday?
I think I'm voting number 7.
Yeah.
Number 7, it's wrong to criticize leaders of the church, even if the criticism is true. Okay, gotcha. And Julia, could you be this second person to take our poll?
Yep. I'm going to vote for 7 too. I think
I think it matches the anger on his
it does,
face.
yeah.
This one, number 7. It's wrong to criticize leaders of the church, even if their criticism is true.
Like in Oak's voice. Yeah.
Very nice. I am personally going with number 3, which is it's none of your freaking business how I found out if he's taking the sacrament. I'm sure that's going to earn me a few enemies, but this is obviously a tongue-in-cheek poll. Now, that reminds me, guys, thanks so much for coming on the Mormon News Roundup. Now, what do you have planned for analyzing Mormonism? How can people get in touch with you? What kind of projects are you guys working on?
We have podcasts coming up where we've got our own publishing company. It's Adina Publishers. And so we've got some books coming up, and we're working on John C. Bennett's History of the Saints or something like that. So yeah, we've got those.
We just released our first LGBTQ book with our publishing company. It's called Outsider by Jay Dupree. It's beautiful. It's available on Amazon and Bookshop.
Yeah, the author's from Australia, and they're really cool.
Okay, and that does remind me that the new episodes of the Mormon Movie Reviews is every Monday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we go and review an old LDS classic. And this week, we're reviewing that old film, Follow Me, 1962, starring Bryce Chamberlain, who also starred in Man's Search for Happiness and was the voice of Jehovah in the LDS Temple Endowment film. This is a really interesting film about a couple who they live in a suburban area, and a couple of neighbors move in who they really don't like. They have a big fight in between the two of them, and then what happens at the end is a surprising twist. Now, I want to thank you so much for joining me on the Mormon News Roundup. I want to give a shout out to Weird Alma on bandcamp.com for this episode's music. And remember,
no unhallowed hand can stop this podcast from progressing.
When it comes to nicknames of the church, such as LDS Church, the Mormon Church, to remove the Lord's name from the Lord's church is a major victory for Satan.
Satan.